So, this is Hutchmatch, finding love in the candy aisle. So,
oh, you coming in here for our session?
Are you already started?
We were just starting, so come on in.
I
You just want candy.
know, I saw the candy.
Okay, what kind do you want?
What do you got?
I got all kinds of M&Ms, Tootsie Roll Pops, and Sour Patch Kids.
Peace.
Okay,
Thank you.
Alright,
Good
bye.
luck, everybody.
Okay. Alright, so I pulled up Facebook one day and I just saw his name is Thomas. And there was a picture with it. The picture didn't pull up. But I didn't need the picture. I knew exactly what it meant. And my first reaction was this feeling of jealousy, because I knew that it meant my friend had found somebody, and it was so frustrating. My second reaction was not the same. My second reaction was that I was happy for her, but I thought about it later of just going, what brought out that green monster in me that I couldn't automatically be happy for her that she had met somebody, that my instant reaction was going, well, why did she get that and I don't? And so I ended up sending a message to a group of my friends, and it's a lot of rattling people. And so I sent them a message and just said, hey, this is what happened today, and it wasn't so pretty. And just told them, just said, I don't like my reaction, and I don't know how to change it, and just wanted their feedback on things. And one of the things that I really appreciated was Ashley Elizabeth told me that her mama, which I call her Mama G. So Mama G says that your true character a lot of times comes out in the second reaction. So it's not necessarily what you think first, but it's what you think next, because it's those instant things that come out. If you dwell in that and if you stay there, that's one thing. But then if you switch to something else, that's something different. So thankfully I didn't stay there in that jealousy of her. But still, it made me think about it, and it started making me think about feelings in general and how we react to feelings and what do we do with them when they aren't the feelings that we want. And so it also made me think about M&Ms. So we've got different kinds of M&Ms. So I don't know what your favorite is. We've got peanut butter M&Ms. We've got regular M&Ms. We've got just plain peanut M&Ms. But so what's the M&M tagline?
Melt in your mouth, not in your hand.
Thank you. Melt in your mouth, not in your hand. All right. So that's a lie. Just in case you didn't know, that's a lie.
Sticky.
Yeah, okay.
And glue.
Yes, okay. I have one niece and 6 nephews. And there's something about little boys, because my oldest nephew is 15 and my youngest nephew is almost 1. But there's something about little boys and they just sweat. Just randomly sometimes. I don't know if the same is true about men, because I know more about 3-year-olds than I do about 30-year-olds. But little boys get sweaty, and but little boys also love M&Ms. And so when little boys have handfuls of M&Ms, their hands end up with colors all over them. And so you have these little boy hands with blue and red and brown, and those things are melted all in their hands. And feelings are the same way. Because sometimes whatever you're feeling, it just covers us. And so the colors of it go all over us. And so the same way that my jealousy, I was covered in green that day when I found out that she had met somebody. I was just green. And so that feeling covered me completely in the same way that M&Ms can cover you completely. They don't always do that, but they can. So the thing about feelings, they can lie to us in the same way M&Ms lie. They, the Mars company lies to us. Feelings lie to us but we don't always realize it in the midst of it. And so that's one of the things to recognize, that whatever you're feeling it is what you're really feeling. And so there's validity to it, but it doesn't necessarily make it the truth. Because what I was feeling in that moment was, I am unlovable. And so I know that that's not the truth, but that's what I felt. And then also, Rebecca Reynolds always says that with feelings, sometimes you just have to ride the wave. You just have to ride the wave of the feelings and just experience it, because that is what you're going through, and then just let it just take its course. And then also, I've been reading a book by Catherine Marshall. I don't know if anybody else. I grew up on Christy and Julie, and I loved those growing up. But she's also written, she wrote 2 fiction books, but she's written a ton of nonfiction books. And so she wrote one book called To Live Again. And in that one, she was married to Peter Marshall. And he was this very well-known pastor. And in their lives, he pretty much was the center of everything. And so they had a son, but her life and their son's life, everything revolved around him. And he died very unexpectedly. And it took her a long time, and that's what the book is about. It's about his death and her, and the year afterwards of her trying to figure out, how do I learn how to restructure my life, because it was, so much of it was about him. And one of the things she says in there is that sometimes it has to be faith over feelings, because you just have to take a stand and say, this is what I believe. I cannot trust my feelings in this. And so it has to be faith, and I'm just going to go with it. And so that's the thing with feelings. But when we have those feelings, I don't know about y'all, I don't always like what I'm feeling. And so then it's a matter of trying to numb ourselves to it. And everybody has a different drug of choice. And so for me, food has always been my thing.
Preach.
Oh yeah. I can think about it, and I can plan it, and I can be like, ooh, I could go pick up this from here and this from here, and I can tell you exactly what I would want. I mean, because I really like food. And so y'all haven't known me long enough to know me and the effects that food have had on my life. But I've lost 150 pounds in the last 10, 12 years. So I say that I have a love affair with food, and it's an abusive relationship. But the thing with food, it's really that I'm just trying to cover up something else with it. And so food might not be your thing, but most people have something that they want to use to numb those feelings. But I don't know if anybody's listened to Brene Brown. Okay. Yeah, Brene Brown is great, and like she has books, and then she has this great TED Talk on vulnerability. But one of the things she says in the TED Talk on vulnerability, well, it's in her books too, but the TED Talk is very accessible because it's 20 minutes. I mean, everybody's got 20 minutes, so oh yeah, so worth it. But the thing is that she when she talks about when we try to numb our feelings, you can't isolate just the bad feelings, because you end up numbing everything. So it's you end up numbing the good and the bad. And so that's one of the dangers of whatever you choose to numb your feelings, is that it's all of it. And then you shut down part of who you are. And so that's one way a lot of times we deal with things, is we numb these feelings and then we shut down in a lot of ways. Or you could be like the Tootsie Roll Pop. So what do we know about a Tootsie Roll Pop?
It takes 3 weeks to get to the center.
That's what they say. But again, what do you think I think about that? They lie.
False.
They do. It is false. So with a Tootsie Roll Pop, it's got this hard core. Oh, no, sorry, not the core. I know, I said that wrong. It's got this hard outer layer. And that's what we do sometimes, is that we build up these walls. It's like, yeah, I do this one so many times. Because we don't want to get hurt, or we don't want those things to affect us, and so we put these walls up, and it's a protection mode. And so the thing is, though, with walls, it's not really living. And so where's the joy in that? If whether you numb your feelings or whether you put up walls, there's this lack of joy, and that's not how we were made to live. And so the thing with relationships, and this is true whether it's a guy-girl relationship or whether it's true with any relationship, because we have relationships with people every single day of our life, and we have to deal with those every single day of our life because we don't live in isolation. And the thing with that is that we have to learn how to deal with people. And so putting walls up doesn't allow us to interact with other people. And part of it is just having this, I think that we all have this desire. We just want somebody to just say, I see you, I know you, and I still love you. And so that's true in any kind of relationship. And so if you have, and if that's our desire, you can't get to that place if you're not letting yourself feel those feelings, or if you're putting those walls up. You can't get to that place where people actually know you. And so, hi, come on in. So, and that's the thing. It's vulnerability, and that's the next part of it. We have to be vulnerable, which is scary. I mean, because that's letting somebody in. And so, Brene Brown talks about that a ton. And one of the things that she did, she's a researcher. So she spends years researching, and then she'll write these books. But one of the things she researched was wholehearted living. And she figured out that in order to have wholehearted living, you have to be vulnerable. And sometimes the correlation she finds between things, when she talks, she'll be like, yeah, you had to get this to get this. And it's like it amazes her of the things that she finds. But the fact that you have to be vulnerable in order to have in order to be this wholehearted person, it just seems kind of amazing that that's the correlation. And then has anybody read Donald Miller's new book, Scary Close? Okay, I recommend it. It's about relationships, and so he talks about because he's gotten married recently, and he talks about his relationships before his wife, and then he talks about meeting her and his engagement, and then them getting married. But it's really interesting. But one of the things that he talks about vulnerability as well, and then also that you have to be vulnerable with people. But you also have to make sure you're being vulnerable with the right people, because you can't just open up at a complete level to everybody. You have to be careful. You have to be careful to some extent. And so, but it was an interesting book to read. It's an interesting take on relationships. He mentioned he mentioned several people that have been involved with the rabbit room. Like he mentioned a bad cockerel in the book. So yeah, I just thought it was kind of neat. I'm like, oh yay! It made me happy.
I know that.
I get happy over random things. But yeah, it's an interesting book. And I think sometimes we're scared to be vulnerable. Come on.
Hey.
That's all.
secret
You are.
hijack session?
You are. Yeah. Yeah. And you're welcome to candy too.
No. Carry on.
Okay. All right. But sometimes I think we're scared to be vulnerable with each other because we think that we are the only ones. And this is no matter what we're talking about, whether it's relationships or whether it's the hard thing in our marriage or whether it's something that you're going through at school or in anything. It's scary. And this is a thing that I always talk about. I'm like, you know what? The emperor is naked. He's not naked because that's indecent. But the emperor is naked. And it just takes one person to say it. And so many times nobody's willing to say anything. And so our stories might not be the same. And a lot of times they're not. But if somebody's just willing to speak up and say, hey, this is where I am, this is my story, it gives another person the freedom to say, oh, well, this is my story. And it gives somebody else the courage to do the same thing. And so that's why I think we need to share our stories with each other. And sometimes somebody has to be the first person. And so I'll be the first person today. And so most of us in the room are single. And I don't know where y'all are with that. You might be fine with that. You might not be fine with that. Personally, for me, it's a roller coaster. Sometimes I'm okay with it and sometimes I'm not. And when I was younger, I just wanted to be a wife and a mother. That's all I ever wanted. And I'm 39 years old and I'm not either thing. And at different times, I've done all the stuff that I've talked about. I definitely used food to numb everything, in a very bad way. If you need to lose 150 pounds, that's not healthy. And so like that was not good for me. So yeah, I definitely used food in a very unhealthy way. I've tried to numb my feelings in other ways. I've put up walls for sure. But it ultimately came down to that whole thing of like, I really just wanted somebody to say, I see you, I know you, and I still love you. And I kept thinking that it had to be in a relationship, that's where I was gonna find that. And I never did. Or I haven't. My younger sister would be mad if I said that. I haven't up until this point. And so, I haven't found that. And my story has been that I've had a lot of rejection when it comes to relationship. I've been on 2 dates in my life. That's the extent of it. I've never been kissed. I mean, it's like these things that you're like, this is not how I thought it was going to be. But, yeah, it's not how I thought it was going to be. And so my story is probably not your story. I hope it's not your story, because I don't want that story for anybody else. But I hope that in sharing my story, it gives you the ability to say what your story is. But the other side of it is the things that I've learned through my story. And part of what I've learned, and some of this I've just come to the point recently of figuring it out, but some of the things that I've learned recently, a relationship is never going to complete me. We hear that, but the thing is it really is true.
I've got a session.
Oh,
Your story's beautiful.
thank you. Love you too. I realized that I had to do things outside of work and church. I'm like, I gotta do things in my life that I enjoy. That even if it's just me doing them, I need to do them. So I started taking dance lessons. So I've been taking, it's fun, y'all. I highly recommend it. But yeah, I started taking dance lessons, and like a lot of people are like, oh, I don't have a partner, so I can't take it. I'm like, yes, you can. I'll tell you, you can. So part of it's figuring out what you want to do for you. At least that's what I've had to do. And then the other thing is, and this has been a big thing, marriage is a gift. It is not the end all be all. The church makes it seem like it is a lot of times. The church makes it seem like this is you have to attain this thing. It's not, but it is a gift. But it's not the only gift. And there's so many other gifts that I have been given, and I want to be appreciative for the things that I have been given. I want to be grateful for the gifts that I have, because I was talking to somebody earlier this weekend of the fact that I'm able to come and help at Hutchmoot every year. If I were married and had a family, I don't know that would have been possible in the same way. And this is such a gift. Oh, this is a huge gift in my life. So that's a piece of my story. Yeah, I guess, like I said, the emperor's naked. I don't want it to be. I don't want it to be this thing of like nobody talks about things, because you just need to have one person speak up. And so that's what I want for all of y'all too, just to have the freedom to feel like you can say whatever. And like I said, I don't want my story to be your story. And there's not anything that says that that it has to be this way or it has to be that way. Everybody's different, but I just want you to feel free to talk about whatever you want to. The other thing is, though, in doing that, it's that we really do need each other. We can't do this alone. In Ecclesiastes, it says that it's woe to the man who falls and has no one to help him up. And just like when I talked about when I saw that thing on Facebook and I was so jealous, and I sent that message to my friends, I needed them because they spoke truth into my life. And I needed somebody to tell me what to do. I'm like, I'm confused in this situation. But like, I reached out to my friends, and it's like, we need our friends, and we really do need each other. So that's why we have Sour Patch Kids. Not that we want to be sour, because we don't. But sorry, they didn't have sweet kids. I did look. I mean, I know they don't make sweet kids, but I looked for something else. But sorry on that one. But yeah, we have Sour Patch Kids because it's all about being there for each other. And so make sure you have your people. Everybody needs their people. And so whether it's rabbit room people, whether it's people at your church, I've got this whole group of dance friends now. Who knew people had that? So there's all kinds of people out there. You just have to find your group. So yeah, it's not just about relationships. It's about, like I said, they're all relationships. But it's not just about what we consider relationships, but it's about all of us being there for each other. But the thing is, in all of this, I think the process of becoming real, because that's what this is all about. It's all about being real. Because that's when we really connect with each other. But the process of becoming real is really hard. It is a process, and it takes time, and it is hard. And so I think just to give ourselves grace in the midst of it. And so the best resource I know of on being real, I was just going to read to y'all. I have to wear reading glasses.
Aw.
This was like this was the worst part of this year. I'm like, I graduated to having to wear reading glasses. That's like a major milestone. I don't wish that on anybody either. But the Velveteen Rabbit.
Yay!
So let me read to you, ladies. Okay. Once there was a Velveteen Rabbit, and in the beginning he was really splendid. He was fat and bunchy, just as a rabbit should be. His coat was brown and white and was very soft. He had real thread whiskers and his ears were lined with pink satin. On Christmas morning, when he sat wedged in the top of the boy's stocking with a sprig of holly between his paws, the effect was charming. Of course, there were other toys that Christmas. Nuts and oranges and a toy engine, and chocolate almonds and a clockwork mouse. But the rabbit was quite the best of all. For at least 2 hours, the boy loved him. And then aunts and uncles came to dinner, and there was a great rustling of tissue paper and unwrapping of parcels. And in the excitement of looking at all the new presents, the Velveteen Rabbit was forgotten. For a long time, he lived in the toy cupboard or on the nursery floor, and no one thought very much about him. He was naturally shy, being only made of velveteen. Some of the more expensive toys made fun of him. The mechanical toys, like the model train, were very stuck up and boasted that they were real. But the rabbit could not claim to be a model of anything, for he didn't know that real rabbits existed. He thought they were all stuffed with sawdust like himself, and he understood that sawdust was quite out of date. Even Timothy, the joined wooden lion, who was made by disabled soldiers, and should have had broader views, put on airs. Between them all, the poor little rabbit was made to feel very insignificant and commonplace. And the only person who was kind to him at all was the skin horse. The skin horse had lived longer in the nursery than any of the others. He was so old that his brown coat was bald in patches and showed the seams underneath, and most of the hairs in his tail had been pulled out to string bead necklaces. He was wise, for he had seen a long succession of mechanical toys arrive to boast and swagger, and by break their mainsprings and pass away. He knew that they were only toys and would never turn into anything else. For nursery magic is very strange and wonderful, and only those playthings that are old and wise and experienced, like the skin horse, understand all about it. What is real? Asked the rabbit one day. Does it mean having things that buzz inside of you and a stick-out handle? Real isn't how you're made, said the skin horse. It's a thing that happens to you. When a child loves you for a long, long time, not just to play with, but really loves you, then you become real. Does it hurt? Sometimes, for he was always truthful. When you are real, you don't mind being hurt. Does it happen all at once, like being wound up, or bit by bit? No, it doesn't happen all at once. You become. It takes a long time. That's why it doesn't often happen to people who break easily, or who have sharp edges, or who have to be carefully kept. Generally, by the time you are real, most of your hair has been loved off, and your eyes drop out, and you get loose in the joints and very shabby. But these things don't matter at all, because once you are real, you can't be ugly, except to people who don't understand. I suppose you are real, and then he wished he had not said it, for he thought the skin horse might be sensitive. But the skin horse only smiled. The boy's uncle made me real. That was many years ago. But once you are real, you can't become unreal again. It lasts always. The rabbit sighed. He thought it would be a long time before this magic called real happened to him. He longed to become real, to know what it felt like. Yet the idea of growing shabby and losing his eyes and whiskers was rather sad. He wished he could become it without these uncomfortable things happening to him. There was a person called Nana who ruled the nursery. Sometimes she took no notice of the playthings lying around, and sometimes, for no reason whatsoever, she went swooping about like a great wind and hustled them away in the cupboards. She called this tidying up, and the playthings all hated it, especially the tin ones. The rabbit didn't mind it so much, for wherever he was thrown, he came down soft. One evening, when the boy was going to bed, he couldn't find the china dog that always slept with him. Nana was in a hurry, and it was too much trouble to hunt for china dogs, and seeing the toy cupboard door stood open, she made a swoop. "Here, take your old bunny. He'll do to sleep with you." That night, and for many nights after, the Velveteen Rabbit slept in the boy's bed. At first, he found it rather uncomfortable, for the boy hugged him very tight, and sometimes he rolled over on him, and sometimes he pushed him so far under the pillow that the rabbit could scarcely breathe. He missed his talks with the Skin Horse during those long moonlight hours in the nursery, when all the house was silent. But very soon he grew to like it, for the boy used to talk to him and make nice tunnels for him underneath the bedclothes, and they had splendid games together in whispers. And when the boy dropped off to sleep, the rabbit would snuggle down close under his warm little chin and dream, with the boy's hands clasped close around him all night long. And so time went on, and the little rabbit was very happy. So happy that he never noticed how his beautiful velveteen fur was getting shabbier and shabbier, and his tail was coming unsewn, and all the pink rubbed off his nose where the boy had kissed him. Spring came, and they had long days in the garden, for wherever the boy went, the rabbit went too. He had rides in the wheelbarrow, and picnics on the grass, and lovely fairy huts built for him under the raspberry canes behind the flower border. One time, the boy was called away suddenly, and the little rabbit was left out on the lawn until long after dark. Nana had to come and look for him with a candle, because the boy was so worried about the rabbit. He couldn't go to sleep unless the rabbit was safely home. He was wet through with the dew and quite earthy from diving into the burrows the boy had made for him in the flower bed. Nana grumbled, "You must have your old bunny. Fancy all that fuss for a toy." "Give me my bunny. You mustn't say that. He isn't a toy. He's real." When the little rabbit heard that, he was happy, for he knew what the Skin Horse had said was true at last. The nursery magic had happened to him, and he was a toy no longer. He was real. The boy himself had said it. That night, he was almost too happy to sleep, and so much love stirred in his little sawdust heart that it almost burst. And into his boot-button eyes that had long ago lost their polish, there came a look of wisdom and beauty, so that even Nana noticed it the next morning when she picked him up and said, "I declare, that old bunny hasn't got quite a knowing expression." That was a wonderful summer. Near the house where they lived was a wood, and in the long June evenings, the boy liked to go there with the Velveteen Rabbit to play. And each day, before the boy wandered off to pick flowers or play among the trees, he made the rabbit a little nest among the bracken. He was a kind-hearted little boy, and he liked the bunny to be comfortable. One evening, the rabbit was sitting there alone, watching the ants. Suddenly, he saw two strange beings creep out of the tall bracken near him. They were rabbits like himself, but quite furry and brand new. They must have been very well made, for their seams didn't show at all, and they changed shape in a queer way when they moved. One minute, they were long and thin, and the next minute, fat and bunchy, instead of always staying the same way like he did. They stared at him, and the little rabbit stared back. All the time, their noses twitched. "Why don't you get up and play with us?" one of them asked. "I don't feel like it," said the rabbit, for he didn't want to explain that he had no clockwork. "I don't believe you can." I can jump higher than anything." He meant when the boy threw him, but of course he didn't want to say so. "Can you hop on your hind legs?" That was a dreadful question, for the Velveteen Rabbit had no hind legs at all. He sat still in the bracken and hoped the other rabbits wouldn't notice. "I don't want to," he said again. But the wild rabbits had very sharp eyes, and this one stretched out his neck and looked. "He hasn't got any hind legs," and he began to laugh. I have got hind legs. I'm sitting on them." "Then stretch them out and show me like this," and he began to whirl around and dance. "I don't like dancing. I'd rather sit still." But all the while he was longing to dance, for a funny new tickly feeling ran through him, and he felt he would give anything in the world to be able to jump about like these rabbits did. The strange rabbit stopped dancing and came quite close. "He doesn't smell right. He isn't a rabbit at all. He isn't real." "I am real. I am real. The boy said so." And he nearly began to cry. Just then there was a sound of footsteps, and the boy ran past near them, and with a stamp of feet and a flash of white tails, the two strange rabbits disappeared. "Come back and play with me. Oh, do come back. I know I'm real." But there was no answer. The Velveteen Rabbit was all alone. Oh dear, why did they run away like they talk to me?" For a long time he sat very still, watching the bracken and hoping that they would come back, but they never did. And presently the sun sank lower, and the little white moths fluttered out, and the boy came and carried him home. Weeks passed, and the little rabbit grew old and shabby, but the boy loved him just as much. He loved him so hard that he loved off all his whiskers, and the pink lining to his ears turned gray. He even began to lose his shape, and he scarcely looked like a rabbit anymore, except to the boy. To him he was always beautiful, and that was all the little rabbit cared about. He didn't mind how he looked to other people, because the nursery magic had made him real, and when you are real, shabbiness doesn't matter. Then one day, the boy grew ill. His face grew flushed, and he talked in his sleep, and his little body was so hot that it burned the little rabbit when he held him close. Strange people came and went in the nursery, and the light burned all night, and through it all the little velveteen rabbit sat guard and never stirred. It was a long, weary time, for the boy was too ill to play, but he knew that the boy needed him. And while the boy lay half asleep, the little rabbit crept closer to the pillow and whispered all sorts of delightful plans for when the boy would be well again. They would go out into the garden among the flowers and butterflies and play splendid games in the raspberry thicket, just the way they used to. At last the fever turned and the boy got better. He was able to sit up in the bed and look at picture books while the little rabbit cuddled close at his side. And one day they let him get up and dress. They had carried the boy out to the balcony, wrapped in a shawl. The little rabbit sat tangled up among the bedclothes listening. The boy was going to the seaside tomorrow. Everything was arranged, and now it only remained to carry out the doctor's orders. The room was to be disinfected, and all the books and toys that the boy had played with in the bed to be burned. "Hooray," thought the little rabbit. "Tomorrow we shall go to the seashore." Just then Nana caught sight of him. "What about his old bunny?" "That?" said the doctor. "Why, it's a mass of scarlet fever germs. Burn it at once." "What nonsense! Get him a new one. He mustn't have that anymore." And so the little rabbit was put into a sack with the old picture books and a lot of rubbish, and carried out to the end of the garden behind the fowl house. That was a fine place to make a bonfire, only the gardener was too busy just then to attend to it. He had the potatoes to dig and the green peas to gather, but next morning he promised to come quite early and burn the whole lot. That night the boy slept in a different bedroom, and he had a new bunny to sleep with. It was a splendid bunny, all white plush with real glass eyes, but the boy was too excited to care very much about it, for tomorrow he was going to the seashore, and that in itself was such a wonderful thing that he could think of nothing else. While the boy was asleep, the little rabbit lay among the old picture books in the corner, and he felt very lonely. He was shivering a little, for he had always been used to sleeping in a nice warm bed, and by this time his coat had worn so thin and threadbare from hugging that it was no longer any protection to him. Nearby he could see the thicket of raspberry canes in whose shadow he had played with the boy on bygone mornings. He thought of those sunlit hours in the garden, how happy they were, and a great sadness came over him. He seemed to see them all pass before him, each more beautiful than the other: the flower bed, the quiet evenings in the woods, and the little ants running over his paws, the wonderful day when he knew that he was real. And he thought of the skin horse, so wise and gentle, and all that he had told him. A tear, a real tear, trickled down his little shabby velvet nose and fell to the ground. And then a wonderful thing happened. For where the tear had fallen grew a mysterious flower, not at all like any other that grew in the garden. It was so beautiful that the little rabbit forgot to cry and just sat there watching it. Then suddenly the blossom opened, and out stepped the loveliest fairy in the whole world. She came close to the little rabbit and gathered him up in her arms and kissed him on his velveteen nose that was all damp from crying. "Little rabbit, do you know who I am?" The rabbit looked up at her, and it seemed to him that he had seen her face before, but he couldn't think where. "I'm the nursery magic fairy. I take care of the playthings that the children have loved. When they are old and worn out and the children don't need them anymore, then I come and take them away with me and turn them into real. Wasn't I real before? You were real to the boy because he loved you. Now you shall be real to everyone." And she held the little rabbit close in her arms and flew him into the woods. It was light now, for the moon had risen. All the forests were beautiful, and the fronds on the bracken shone like frosted silver. In the open glades between the tree trunks, the wild rabbits danced with their shadows on the velvet grass, but when they saw the fairy, they stopped dancing and stood around in a ring to stare at her. "I brought you a new playfellow. You must be very kind to him and teach him all he needs to know in Rabbitland, for he is going to live with you forever and ever." And she kissed the little rabbit again. "Run and play, little rabbit." The little rabbit sat quite still for a moment and never moved, for when he saw the wild rabbits dancing around him, he remembered about his hind legs. He didn't want them to know that he was made all in one piece. He didn't know that when the fairy kissed him the last time, she had changed him altogether. He might have sat there for a long time, too shy to move, if just when something hadn't tickled his nose, and before he thought what he was doing, he lifted his hind toe to scratch it. He actually had hind legs. Instead of dingy velveteen, he had brown fur, soft and shiny. His ears twitched by themselves, and his whiskers were so long that they brushed the grass. He gave one leap, and the joy of using those hind legs was so great that he went spinning about the turf on them, jumping sideways and whirling about as the others did. He grew so excited that when at last he did stop to thank the fairy, she had gone. He was a real rabbit at last, at home with the other rabbits. Autumn passed, and winter, and then the spring. While the boy was out playing in the woods, two rabbits crept out and peeped at him. One of them was brown all over, but the other had markings under his fur, and about his soft little nose, his round black eyes, there was something familiar, so that the boy thought to himself, "Why, he looks just like my old bunny that was lost when I had scarlet fever." But he never knew it really was his own bunny, come back to look at the child who had first helped him to be real. So, that is finding love in the candy aisle. But it really all comes down to being real, being vulnerable, being willing to experience your emotions in the midst of it, whether it's fun or not. But yeah, a lot of it's just being real, being willing to share your story. Thank y'all for coming.
Yay.
Oh, and this candy's